Denver International Airport. Monday morning, the atmosphere buzzed like a stirred-up beehive. The sound of suitcase wheels scraping against tile, children squealing with excitement, flight announcements echoing through the loudspeakers all mingled with the weary sighs of adults standing in line. In that crowd, no one noticed the middle-aged man in a crisply pressed military uniform, each of his firm steps echoing steadily across the cold stone floor. Colonel Marcus Dean, 56 years old, had been to this airport many times before. But today, he wasn't on a business trip, he wasn't heading home, and he wasn't just another passenger. Today, he carried out a duty no one ever wants to receive to bring a fallen soldier home, one last time. In his heart, the flag-draped remains he accompanied were not just a name. They were Corporal Tyler James, 22 years old, a soldier who had fallen before he could finish writing a letter to his mother, a young man who never got the chance to say goodbye. For Dean, this wasn't simply a task, it was a sacred promise. The kind every service member understands from the very first day they put on the uniform. No one gets left behind. Cold air swept in each time the revolving doors opened, but Marcus Dean didn't flinch. He stopped at the check-in counter, pulled out military documents, his ID, and took a deep breath. There was no grand gesture about him, only a solemn silence. The kind of silence you feel when standing before a flag-draped casket. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from knowing that a single mistake, a moment of carelessness or indifference by anyone here, would be an act of disrespect. Disrespect to the fallen. Disrespect to the family waiting on the other side of the country. Disrespect to the very values the U.S. military stands for. While others were rushing to catch flights for morning meetings, tapping their phones for the nearest coffee shop, or fuming over overweight luggage, Colonel Dean had one mission: to bring his fellow soldier home with honor, on time, and by the book. But what he didn't know was that in just a few minutes, everything would go off course. And in this place, he thought he knew so well, he would have to fight once more. Not for life, not on a battlefield, but for something even greater: respect. Colonel Marcus Dean stood at the airline check-in counter, his firm hands resting gently on the cold wooden surface. Beside him lay a neatly clipped folder of military documents. There was nothing unusual about it, just the standard materials he had presented dozens of times over 30 years of service. Spécial Escort Autorisation. Military Identification Confirmation. Priority Military Code. All valid, nothing was wrong. The female agent, around 30, wearing a navy blue uniform with a polished name badge, received the folder with a demeanor that was completely routine. She didn't look at him, at least not in the eyes. Just a glance. Typing. A quick skim of the screen. Silence. Her fingers paused. Her gaze flicked over his name once more. Then her expression subtly shifted, her shoulders slightly tensed. It lasted less than 3 seconds, but to Colonel Dean, a man who had trained soldiers to survive in combat zones, that shift rang like an alarm. "I'm sorry, sir. I need to double-check something," she said, her voice slightly strained. Dean nodded, said nothing. He stood there, silent, patient, like always. But this time, it was different. She whispered to a nearby colleague. That colleague, an older man, glanced briefly at the documents, then returned to his screen. No clear answer was offered. After a few minutes of hushed discussion, the agent returned with a strained smile. "Sir, I'm very sorry, but there are some internal security issues with your file. We can't allow you to board this flight." Her words were soft, but they cut into the chest of a man carrying out the solemn duty of escorting a fallen brother home. Colonel Dean tilted his head slightly. He didn't raise his voice. He just breathed deeply. "I'm escorting the remains of a fallen service member. All paperwork is cleared. This is an official military duty, not a personal trip." The agent avoided his gaze. She repeated the phrase, "internal security protocol," as if it were some kind of magic phrase that could justify any wrongful decision. The line behind him began to stir. Some sighed quietly. Others stared at the uniformed man being denied boarding. Something didn't feel right, everyone could sense it. Colonel Dean remained still, like a monument amid the chaos. But this wasn't a battlefield, it was a check-in desk. And this was a different kind of battle, one against indifference, bureaucracy, and so-called policy. "Then tell me exactly," he asked, voice calm and unwavering. "What policy is it?" No answer. There was no answer. And in that silence, something shifted in the hearts of the bystanders. Not because he was angry, but because he was so calm, so right, so dignified. A soldier trying to bring a fallen comrade home had been turned away with nothing but a vague excuse. And for many in that terminal, that was unacceptable. Colonel Marcus Dean stood unmoving at the counter, even as the eyes around him began to turn toward him. Not because he asked for attention, but because his unwavering silence demanded it. A decorated officer, in full uniform, his cap squarely in place, was being denied a flight over internal security? No one said it aloud, but everyone felt the injustice unfolding in front of them. And then, from a seat near the back, a voice rang out, firm, but not angry. "Excuse me, is there a problem with this soldier?" Everyone turned. An older man, gray hair poking from under a cap bearing the U.S. Marine Corps logo, stood tall. His sun-weathered face and deep wrinkles weren't just features, they were a story, a fellow veteran. "I've passed through hundreds of airport checkpoints across this country," he continued, voice steady, "and I've never seen an officer escorting a fallen comrade get denied like this. What policy blocks a soldier from fulfilling his duty?" No one replied. The manager behind the desk shifted nervously, eyes darting between the staff. A few passengers pulled out their phones not to play games, but to record. Because they knew this wasn't just a bureaucratic glitch. This was a public wound to national honor. The air grew heavy not with tension, but with rising integrity. A young woman's hand trembled as she lifted her phone to live stream, voice choked with emotion. "I don't mean to intrude, but I'm streaming this live. People need to see this. A U.S. Army colonel is being denied boarding while escorting a fallen soldier's remains." Soon, a young man in a hoodie joined in, filming and stating clearly, "This isn't right. This is just wrong." A middle-aged woman clutching her purse whispered to her husband, "I can't believe this. He's in uniform. And they're treating him like this?" The murmurs grew louder. Curiosity turned into outrage, into voices ready to speak. It was no longer just a man being denied boarding, it was a symbol being disrespected. And that's when the power of community spoke up. The silence, once a shield for misconduct, now became a platform for resistance. The phones weren't just recording, they were delivering a message. "We see you, and we don't accept this." Colonel Dean said nothing, but he knew he was no longer standing alone. And from that moment forward, this would not pass quietly like so many times before. Not this time. Each phone raised was a living witness. Each tweet, each livestream, each hashtag was an arrow piercing the fragile veil called internal policy. From a quiet corner of Denver International Airport, the story of a U.S. officer being denied a flight while escorting a fallen soldier began spreading across America fast, powerful, and unstoppable. A young traveler in a silver-gray hoodie exhaled as he looked at his phone screen. "It's blowing up. Twitter's going nuts." A woman near the glass wall turned to her husband, eyes wide. "I can't believe it. Thousands of shares in minutes." The media took notice. U.S. Officer denied flight while escorting fallen soldier, system error or disrespect? Public opinion had chosen its side, and it wasn't with the airline. Just as the situation seemed to spiral beyond control, a figure entered and silenced the entire concourse. A tall man in a dark military dress uniform strode past the crowd. On his chest was a badge that read, "Major Anthony Granger, Department of the Army." He walked straight to Colonel Dean, no questions needed. He already knew. "Colonel," he said, calm but commanding, "we've received the report. From this moment on, you won't be flying commercial. A military aircraft is standing by." The terminal froze for a beat. The airline manager, who had tried to smooth things over with vague apologies, now looked painfully out of place. He struggled to regain composure. We're sorry for the misunderstanding. We're working to resolve." Major Granger cut him off, locking eyes. "There's no misunderstanding left. You misjudged the man, and you misjudged the spirit of this nation." A soldier was placed back on the right path. But the fight to restore respect had only just begun. Colonel Marcus Dean did not smile in victory. He simply adjusted his cap, tightened the strap on his document bag, and nodded to the senior officer. "Thank you, Major. I'll finish the rest." Colonel Marcus Dean left Denver International Airport in solemn silence. Not because he had gained privilege, but because a promise had been honored. Outside, the military aircraft awaited with Corporal Tyler James aboard. No sirens, no flashing lights. Only a long corridor lined with a flag-draped carpet and quiet reverence from all present. The flight was silent. No roaring engine could drown out the steady rhythm of gratitude. When the flag-covered casket was delivered to the family, the elderly mother didn't cry. She simply placed a trembling hand on the folded flag and whispered, "You made it home, just like you promised me." The father, eyes wet, placed a firm hand on his wife's shoulder and silently nodded to Colonel Dean. No words were needed. They understood. Their son's sacrifice had not been abandoned on the road. Back at the airport, the story wasn't over. The videos continued to circulate. The airline faced growing backlash. The manager who had stood in Colonel Dean's way was suspended. Days later, she posted on her page, "I looked into the eyes of a soldier on duty and turned him away because I didn't understand. Today, I don't need to be fired. I just need to apologize and start over, to learn what we truly mean by the word respect." No one knows if she's still working there, but thousands shared her post. Not because she was right, but because she didn't stay silent, because sometimes silence is what keeps injustice alive. And all it takes is one person to stand, to say this is wrong, and the entire crowd will no longer look away. Colonel Dean completed his mission, but it was the community that helped him reclaim something even greater than a boarding pass: recognition, truth, and honor. Some battles aren't fought on the front lines. They unfold quietly in everyday life, where honor and respect must be defended, not with weapons, but with truth and courage. Colonel Marcus Dean never sought attention. He simply wanted to fulfill a promise to a fallen brother. But his unwavering response to injustice, his refusal to yield to indifference, awakened something in all of us. We often think justice is someone else's job, somewhere far away. But that day, justice began with one voice. One person is recording, one person asking, "What's going on here?" And then, thousands more joined in. This wasn't just the story of bringing a soldier home. It was the journey to restore respect and decency to their rightful place in our society. In a world growing louder and more disconnected, sometimes the right thing doesn't require a speech, just your refusal to stay silent. One word, one question, one action can be the spark that lights a movement. If you ever witness something wrong, don't look away. If you believe in justice, if you believe in honoring those who gave everything, let people know where you stand. Tell us below, what would you have done if you were at the airport that day? Tap like if this story moved you. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because we'll keep sharing the stories that stir your heart.